The tragic end for Nikki Whitehead was the last chapter in a troubled, difficult life. She was literally born in prison, her mother doing time for drug possession. Nikki was raised by her grandmother, who had a tough time keeping her on the straight and narrow.
She didn't have what you call a curfew. Nikki was able to come and go as, she pretty much pleased.
At only 17 years old, Nikki ended up pregnant with twins, naming the girls Tasmia and Jasmia, known as Tas and Jas. For 12 years, the trio lived with Nikki's grandmother. That would be the girls' great-grandmother. But Nikki dreamed of giving her daughters a better life.
She definitely didn't want them to go in the same direction, that the path that she went down.
So Nikki and the twins moved about 20 miles away to Conyers, Georgia. The young mom made sure her girls had the advantages that eluded her, putting them in dance and music classes. Nothing but the best for her beautiful princesses.
She did their hair, their makeup, and it was just, for Nikki, when it came to her kids, it was always a celebration.
The girls were also straight-A students, with hopes of one day going to Harvard. But their path to success was dramatically diverted when the girls hit high school.
It was difficult for them to start hearing and accepting, the word no. As Nikki became more stern, that's just something that they couldn't get used to.
Tas and Jas bitterly resented their mother's discipline. And soon, the rage would boil over when Nikki took away Tas's cell phone.
When she let it be known that, hey, you cannot, you're 14, you can't talk to 17-year-old guys, and, you can't be on the phone at a certain time, and you can't stay out or whatnot, that's when I think it became a battle.
But it was clear Nikki was losing control. Listen to this frantic 911 call when she discovered Jas had snuck out in the middle of the night to meet her boyfriend.
Conyers 911, where's your emergency?
I just woke up and my daughter's gone at the house.
How old is your daughter?
Oh, Lord, 13.
Two once sweet girls had suddenly morphed into twin terrors. Officer Myra Scruggs responded to a call from Nikki after yet another blowout.
I talked with the girls at great length, trying to figure out what was going on. I actually went in the bedroom with the girls. They had a closet full of beautiful name brand clothes, beautiful shoes. Their hair was immaculate. I mean, these girls really had a good home.
At the time, the twins told the officer they didn't want to live with their mom and insisted on moving back with their great-grandmother, where the rules were relaxed.
Nikki said they just basically wanted their way, and it just wasn't going to happen.
But after interviewing Nikki, Tas, and Jas, Scruggs says she had an unsettling feeling.
The girls seem very innocent, very sweet. But the look in Nikki's face, she was fearful of those children. She knew that they worked together.
After a few hours, everything appeared to have calmed down.
The girls were just ready to, okay, we're just gonna go to our rooms and we're gonna go to bed, and maybe we'll just call their great-grandmother tomorrow and we can go see her. And they left it like it was all okay.
But Officer Scruggs had a gnawing feeling that something just wasn't right. Instead of leaving the subdivision, she stayed close.
I just knew it wasn't over. And within, I would say, 3 or 4 minutes, I could hear screaming coming from the direction of the house. Both of them jumped on her, and the two of them began to beat her.
Nikki manages to get away and calls 911. Officer Scruggs rushed back to the house.
Nikki's running out of the house with the cordless phone in her hand, hysterical. I pulled up, asked her what happened. She said as soon as I left that the girls had attacked her.
Tas and Jas tell an entirely different story.
The twins said that once they went back in the house after we left, that their mother became abusive with them, told them that they were not going anywhere, and started to beat them.
Officer Scruggs said the physical evidence clearly showed that Nikki was the victim.
She had scratches on her neck, scratches on her chest, and she was hysterical. The girls, on the other hand, had no marks on them, no indication that really they had been in any kind of an altercation. Talking with them, I didn't believe a thing that the girls had said.
Even more disturbing, she recalls the girls' eerie calm after the attack.
You could have been two strangers and there would have been more emotion shown.
This time, Tas and Jas are taken into custody and charged. They are in and out of court for years and ordered, along with their mother, to undergo counseling.
It was a living hell for her, only because the kids did not want to be back with her.
Family members knew the twins resented Nikki, but most chalked it up to the rebellious teenage phase. But these mother-daughter spats are nothing compared to the next time the cops are called to the house. The girls are in an absolute panic.
As I was pulling out to get to the gate, the young lady stopped me saying someone had killed her mother.
It was late in the day, just after school, when Tas and Jas returned home only to find their mother lying dead in a blood-soaked bathtub. And a swirl of questions. Who could have done such a horrendous act?
You walked in and what happened?
To the kitchen, and I seen the blood all in there on the floor. And I went in there and I seen her.
A house of strife has turned into a house of horrors. Identical twin sisters have come home from school to find their mother brutally murdered. Cops say Nikki Whitehead was stabbed 80 times with a kitchen knife, her spinal cord nearly severed.
When I walked in the front door, it was the first time I'd ever been on something as horrific as that.
Nikki and her daughters had a history of arguments and trouble. But it was unfathomable to think these two petite 16-year-olds were capable of murder.
These are beautiful young girls, very tiny little things. They look harmless.
Immediately after the horrendous discovery, the twins are consoled by police, who are simply looking for answers.
Was she on the floor, on the bed?
In the bathtub.
In the bathtub?
Who would want Nikki dead? Cops soon learn the girls have a father.
The father, you know, he had already had a family. He was married. So that was something else that she had to deal with.
But he's got an ironclad alibi. He was living in Canada at the time of the murder. Then the girls themselves tell investigators that Nikki has 2 boyfriends. Was a love triangle what sparked a murder?
She lived with Robert, and she also had a boyfriend named Joe. The twins had indicated that Robert had overheard her speaking to the other boyfriend on the phone and indicated that Robert had confronted Nikki about the infidelity.
But as cops are tracking leads, and long before detectives had Tas and Jas in a quiet interrogation room, they noticed something odd on the drive to headquarters.
One of the twins we observed in the back of the ambulance. We saw her bite her arm. We stopped her and asked her, hey, what are you doing? And she explained that she does that when she gets upset.
Inside the room, Tas can be seen on surveillance camera rocking back and forth.
Oh, my grandma. Oh, my mama.
Comforting each other and even sharing a kiss.
You walked in and what happened?
To the kitchen and put myself down. And I seen the blood all in there on the floor. And I went in there and I seen her and I touched her.
Detectives try to comfort the sisters. But then, a startling comment takes Detective Ken Swift off guard.
These 2 girls were, hugging each other and in each other's arms. And when I said, what can I do to make this easier for you? They turned and looked at me and they said, can we watch CSI? And immediately, the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. Essentially, it was right then, and it was like, okay, something was very, very off.
And cops noticed something even more suspicious. The girls' complete lack of empathy for their dead mother.
They would cry a lot, but it was tearless crying. When I would ask them to describe their mother, they were very insulting of their mother.
During the interview, detectives observe the twins are still wearing gloves.
Let me see your hands and your arms. What happened here?
I got into a fight.
Did you get in a fight with her?
But as they weave their story to cops, back at the bloody crime scene, investigators are uncovering physical evidence. evidence yielding valuable clues.
The sinks were completely clean and wiped. We found shoes in their back of their closet that had blood on it.
And in Tas's bedroom, what could be the most macabre piece of the murder puzzle.
I noticed there's a pair of brown boots that have a significant amount of blood on them, and they're in a shoebox. I found a clump of hair, which normally a clump of hair is insignificant in a female's house simply because there's hair everywhere. But when that clump of hair has been pulled out of somebody's head and then has been wrapped in a napkin and stuffed into the toe of a shoe, you begin to realize that the twins were not telling us anything that was truthful.
Investigators begin to realize it's no former boyfriend or husband who carried out this murder. The killers are right under their noses.
Right now we gotta be strong so they can catch the person who did it.
The teenagers seem clueless, or is it an act? Take a look at how Tas looks directly at the surveillance camera. Knowing she's being filmed, giving an award-winning performance.
I'm never gonna be happy now. Because somebody was selfish and took my mom away from me.
But the twins' lives begin to unravel further when detectives retrace their movements on the day of the murder.
What time did y'all leave the house this morning?
We missed the bus, so we had to walk.
You walked all the way to Rockdale?
It's not far.
About what time did you leave?
7:30.
But surveillance video from a nearby gas station shows the twins didn't walk to school that day. They actually hitched a ride from a stranger.
We began catching them in lies concerning their time frames or their details. They began to be very angry and would become argumentative and very uncooperative.
And the high school surveillance video shows the twins in the hallway, hours after they told police they arrived at school.
We were able to determine that they arrived there at mid-morning, where they told us they were only about 10 minutes late for school.
Detectives separate the twisted, inseparable teens, putting them in different interrogation rooms. Being apart seems to wear them down.
You think we did it? I don't think y'all did nothing. Why you say that? It seemed like it. Who said that? No, it just seemed like how y'all was questioning us and something that seemed like y'all think we did it.
Unfortunately, with only circumstantial evidence prior to testing what's found in the home, cops can't hold the girls, who are released to their great-grandmother. For the next 4 months, Tas and Jas lead a normal life, going to school, hanging out with friends, even attending prom. Meanwhile, police are watching, waiting, and testing the evidence, quietly building their case.
We found items in their closet that had blood on them. And so when we were trying to distinguish whose blood, you cannot determine between twins because they have the same DNA.
And then a startling clue, almost as if it came from beyond the grave.
To Nikki's credit, she did not go down without a fight, and she left evidence on one of her girls as a marker.
Remember when cops saw Tas biting her arm, explaining it away as a nervous habit? Detectives say she was trying to cover up Nikki's bite mark on her arm.
We had a dental examination of Nikki's teeth, and they matched it to the bite on the twin.
And autopsy results revealed another grim detail.
They found human hair between Nikki's teeth. We would surmise that twin was behind Nikki and had her from around the front. Nikki's fighting for her life and bit her arm, and that's how the hair became embedded in her teeth.
Cops are quickly zeroing in on what appears to be two pretty little liars. And on the last day of school before summer break, with enough probable cause, detectives arrest Tas at her home. She's cuffed and aggressively frisked. Then, police head to Rockdale High to nab her sister, Jas.
We decided we were going to arrest them on the last day of school for fear of they were going to take flight out of the country to avoid the charges.
The now evil twins seen here, looking defiant and arrogant in their mugshots, are charged with felony murder and aggravated assault in their mother's death. Now listen as their true natures are revealed on this police car recording.
I'm not going down for something I did not do. Please file a murder with me, and then get real personal. For real. What the you waiting for? They having coffee and donuts and having a good jolly old time.
The case looked to be a slam dunk, but would they ever face trial, or would they need to?
Everything they said, whether it had some truth or fiction in it, had their self-interest at heart.
Identical twin sisters known as Tas and Jas are caught in a web of lies and incriminating evidence. Arrested for the brutal slaying of their mother, Nikki Whitehead.
You know, I don't believe anything they say. Everything they said, whether it had some truth or fiction in it, had their self-interest at heart.
The 16-year-old girls are hauled off to jail, keeping silent about the chilling crime. But after nearly 4 years awaiting trial, the twins finally come forward with a stunning admission, outright confessing to the brutal attack and murder.
I think I picked up a knife and I stabbed her.
Where did you stab her?
I think I stabbed her in the stomach. It was multiple times. I think I had her hands, Jas her feet. Kind of like a joint effort. She was heavy. We just put it in. The water was turned on.
At some point in time, you did realize that morning your mom was dead.
Yeah.
As part of a deal with the state to avoid trial, Tas and Jas pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Both were sentenced to 30 years in prison. But the question remains, what really happened that dark day?
By their account, they were up to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They didn't want to get up when they were awakened to go to school for by their mother. And I think that's what sparked the attack, the confrontation, and that they killed their mother. And then they spent a couple of hours fabricating parts of the crime scene and cleaning it up. And then they went to school so that they would have an alibi.
Detectives say they found a journal in the home. It revealed a premeditated plan to murder their mother for some time.
And they would write back and forth to each other how much they disliked their mother, and even to the point that they said in their writings that if they didn't get rid of her soon, they weren't going to be able to.
This was an act of rage. It was, the two girls had planned for this event.
Cops believe Nikki never stood a chance in the savage attack. The bloody path even extends to outside the home, suggesting Nikki managed to get away, but the girls dragged her back to the house to finish her off.
At some point, Nikki escaped, made it to that house next door. When we interviewed that resident, he recalled someone yelling, and he heard someone ring his doorbell. He was in bed at the time, and he didn't get up to go investigate. We could see where Nikki's bare feet exited and re-entered through that door in blood. So we would surmise that she was pulled back into the house where the attack resumed.
Back in the house, the heinous assault continued, the girls smashing their mother over the head with a pot, stabbing her with a kitchen knife, choking her with the ribbon of a medal, then dragging her body into the tub, where they left her to die.
What does she say when she's in the tub?
Kill me now, and I'll kill y'all.
But what happened then?
She just, she went under a couple times, and that was it.
I'm sure that their confession was self-interested. They were looking out for themselves and had been coached by attorneys, and they said enough to live up to their part of the plea.
By the time they serve their 30-year sentence, the twins will be in their 40s. In the meantime, Jas has traded in her jailhouse jumpsuit for a different uniform, at least for a day. She's graduated high school in the Slammer and even served as class valedictorian.
I worked really, really, really hard. I stayed up all night some days to finish some of the things they gave me.
And despite Jas and Tas admitting to slaughtering their own mother, Nikki's own grandmother, the girl's great-grandmother, Della Frazier, is unbelievably beaming with pride at the accomplishments Jas is making while behind bars.
I am so proud of her. I feel so good about what she accomplished. And I always wanted to see this day come, that she graduated and moved on to things that she wants to do in life, because she is a very gifted girl, very.
And yet, underneath the proud smile is a cold-blooded killer, part of an evil duo who viciously killed the very woman who gave them life.
She had fought for her life. You know that her last few moments of life had to be horrible. That she was being murdered by her own daughters, twin daughters, and that she fought for her life and lost.
But to try to get inside the minds of Jas and Tas Whitehead, we brought in forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober. Doc, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Chris.
You ever see a case quite like this where you have twins, good students, active kids, murder their mother?
Chris, this is a relatively rare phenomenon. Only about 2% of homicides are what we call patricides, or cases where kids kill their parents. And out of that 2%, only 15% are daughters that kill their parents.
The mother was stabbed some 80 times. That's sending a message.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because the majority of the cases where daughters kill their mothers, you see this quite often, where they'll be stabbing 60, 70, 80 times. There's just so much rage, especially where the daughters kill their mothers.
Are they able to be rehabilitated?
Obviously, it will depend how they do when they're in prison. Are there any violent episodes while they're incarcerated? But absent that, I do think that when they come back into society, if they had the right supports, there would be a good probability for rehabilitation.
Doctor, thank you very much for your
Thanks,
insight.
Chris.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.